They keep you 20, 30, 40, 50 years behind the times. That's what they do. And when something crops up that you should see, or a few people are noticing, in comes their propaganda. They're the first to put out the propaganda. Like the noctilucent clouds that suddenly started appearing, and they try to tell you how far back they went, and they were not new at all, and all this rubbish. It was all rubbish. Always putting the spin on things so that you can tell an idiot, and there's lots of idiots out there. Have you ever looked at the sky and wondered what all those lines are? And they'll tell you, must be a lot of aircraft, you know. There's about 2 aircraft going to Sudbury per day here. That's about it. Meanwhile, you've got about 15 in the air spraying back and forth. Well, I don't know. But that's they're gone. Most folk are gone, and you've got to accept that. Or you'll spend your life battering your head, trying to use your ego to dominate their ego until they admit you're right. And that's a killer. Don't fall into that trap. Most folk will do that with their families. All you do is get kicked out, or they'll move off, or something like that. You can only use your time on people who are worthwhile to use it upon. Ones who are already asking questions. If they're asking questions, that means they're not quite so lobotomized as the rest. They have a bit of wildness there, of survivable capabilities. Now, I've gone on in quite depth for years actually, because when the spraying started here daily in Ontario, daily it started in 1998. I can remember the day it started. I couldn't believe it when I walked outside, and they were much lower at that time, doing heavy, long trails from horizon to horizon, and it literally was like a checkerboard, north, south, east, west. And it's been like that ever since. They're a bit higher now. They've got better stuff to mix together that form into this mushy eggshell color much quicker than the old types that they used. And they are adding to it with different things here and there. That's why your throat gets raspy or sore throats. That's why about 60% of the public get recurrent bronchitis now. They just don't know what causes it. That's why everyone's allergic to everything. They call it allergies. Well, no wonder you're being poisoned, folks. This article here sums up a lot of this. I'm going to read quite a lot of it tonight because it's well worth it, and it's got a lot in it. And it's not speculation. It's from government sources themselves. And it's from the Wise Up Journal. And it's from the 13th of April, 2010. Howard Hughes Company, the company's climate change fight, it says. We're so familiar with nonsensical trivia that fills so many news mediums these days that the following information might appear the same, but it's quite the opposite. It will soon become apparent from authorized sources how important it is. To give the subject proper consideration, we need to look at a number of these sources, including an important government-funded report, an article published by the New York Times, written by Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour M. Hersh, reminding us of some old facts, and some other governmental sources. And I'll read some of this text when I come back. I mean, it really is on the ball. And I've got all this stuff already, and I've read this book, so I'll touch on some of the main parts of it and implications of it for you too. We're living in a fantasy, folks. Back after these messages. Hi, folks. This is Alan Watt, and we're cutting through the matrix, reading an article from Wise Up on the spraying and the governmental sources that you can go to see, yep, they're doing it all right, and how they've gone about it up till this present time, and where they want to go with it. It says the text below is taken directly from the United States government patent site. The restricted for government-only domain.gov can be seen in the site's address. It shows a technology with patent number, and it gives you the number by Hughes Aircraft Company, filed in 1990, with relating technology filed back in 1965. Keep in mind that the U.S. government funded a large 1992 report titled, this is a very important report or book really, Policy Implications of Greenhouse Warming, Mitigation, Adaptation, and the Science Base. By the way, you can get it on PDF and on Scribd, I think, if you do a search. There's a few places you can get it for free, which can be read from the archive of the National Academies Press. You can also go in there too and take it basically chapter by chapter. Discuss this technology on a global scale and expressed, quote, The surprise of this analysis is the relatively low costs. This is what they're on about, the low costs of dumping aluminum oxide and various other metallic oxides into the atmosphere. And they said at the time, we can do this within 2 years. That was published in 1992. It says, we'll read some more detailed extracts from this report momentarily and see how current administrations support it. But first, the technology that Hughes Company developed decades ago. Now, all the links that I'll mention are on the site, the gov links and whole bits from the government itself. So there's no conspiracy here. It's from them, those guys. And it's got the patent numbers and all the rest of it too, and links to the patent numbers. But listen to this. This is what's in this particular policy implications of greenhouse warming. That all the it's a Bible for these guys at the top. It says stratospheric Welshback seeding for reduction of global warming. This invention relates to a method for the reduction of global warming resulting from the greenhouse effect, and in particular to a method which involves the seeding of the Earth's stratosphere with Welshback-like materials. Most current approaches to reduce global warming are to restrict the release of various greenhouse gases, such as CO2, CFC and methane. These imply the need to establish new regulations and the need to monitor various gases and to enforce the regulations. One technique proposed to seed the metallic particles was to add the tiny particles to the jet fuel of jetliners so that the particles would be emitted from the jet engine exhaust while the airliner was at its cruising altitude. While this method would increase the reflection of visible light incident from space, the metallic particles would trap the long wavelength black body radiation released from the Earth. This could result in net increase in global warming. It said here, not decrease by increase. And you found that too. When you're spraying heavily in a summer with that polymer type material C, it actually increases the heat down below. So such materials can include the class of materials known as Welshback's materials. Oxides of metals such as aluminum oxide are also suitable for the purpose. The greenhouse gases layer typically extends between 7 and 13 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The seeding of the stratosphere occurs within this layer. The particles suspended in the stratosphere. And that's all I give, to suspend it in the stratosphere for as long as possible. This article also, I've gone into all these different sites, by the way, in the government sites. They admit that in sunrise and sunset you'll get these odd kind of rainbow effects around the sun. That's been getting seen now since 98 pretty regularly now. But they also mention that too, that they're going to use multi-battery and arrays of super lasers to pulse through the atmosphere. And I've seen the pulsation effects on some nights. It's like a piano, someone playing a piano from top to bottom, back and forth, rippling across the sky. They're actually doing this stuff. Have been for years, folks. To continue with this one here, it says here, it's presently believed that the particle sizes in the 10 to 100 micron range would be suitable for the seeding purposes. Larger particles would tend to settle to the Earth more quickly. By the way, they also use jet streams. That's why I get so much dumped on top of me here. It carries it all the way down, large carrying area, down to Buffalo and New York area. And it comes up. They also seed it heavily over Chicago area. The greenhouse gases are typically in the Earth's stratosphere at an altitude of 7 to 13 kilometers. This suggests that the particle seeding should be done at an altitude order of 10 kilometers and then be seeded by dispersal from seeding aircraft. One exemplary technique may be via the jet fuel as suggested by prior work, remember, they'd already done the studies on it back then, regarding the metallic particles. The National Academy of Sciences, who have a U.S. Congress charter, organized the creation of the report, again, policy implication of greenhouse warming, mitigation, adaptation, and the science base. For those who have a brain and don't mind struggling through stuff, you'll find it fascinating. For the rest of them, forget it. It's not written for you. It's just not written. You'll lose interest, after a few sentences. As I said, on page 8 of the front matter, it states that the project was funded by the government, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and got other funding from a consortium of private foundations, again, the parallel government, including the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Charles E. Culpeper Foundation, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. The project had a massive amount of people involved, and United Nations man Maurice Strong, you know Maurice Strong, the technocrat, that's what he's called, a technocrat, not responsible to the public, but makes big agendas like the Earth Charter. He was there at the conception phase, as stated on page 3. This is from the government. These introductory pages show what specialists from private and governmental bodies were involved with tunnel knowledge in the fields of chemistry, law, the Air Force, biomedical engineering, civil and environmental engineering, genetics is involved, atmospheric physics, and economics, to name a few. Professors were brought in from the most upper-class colleges in the United States, such as Harvard, Yale, Carnegie, Berkeley, MIT, who constantly work with the United States Department of Defense, and MIT certainly does it more than others, the Rockefeller University, and so on. General Motors acquired Hughes Aircraft Company, plus its technology, and their vice president of the research laboratories, Robert Frosch, took part along with Joseph Glass, the director, vice president, and general manager of the fluorochemical division at DuPont, the world's second largest chemical corporation that also works with the military. There are many other notables, including John McLucas and former U.S. Secretary of the Air Force. On page 59 of the report, Hughes patented his way is listed amongst other options. The patent is to use aircraft to maintain a cloud of dust in the low stratosphere to reflect sunlight. Page 59 also states, geoengineering options appear technically feasible in terms of cooling effects and costs on the basis of currently available preliminary information. This is back in the early 90s, folks. On page 44 and 60, they expressed their delight at such low cost. They actually have it broken down when you actually go into that, the links I'll give you from the government, at so much per ton. Which I'm sure the military, who don't mind spending billions in a single plane, could also share. By the way, they're using military jets. They decided eventually to change to military jets because when you force these metallic particles through the exhaust systems of jets, they tend to wear it out like a sandblaster would do. So they have to be special inside. Obviously, the titanium or some kind of carbide inside of it to stop it getting worn away as the stuff is blasted through. Perhaps one of the surprises of the analysis is the relatively low cost at which some of the geoengineering options might be implemented. On page 454 of the 1992 Global Geoengineering Report, they go into the costs of chemtrailing with Hughes-type technology. If a dust distribution mission requires the equivalent of a 500-mile flight, about 1.5 hours, the delivery cost for dust is $500 per ton. And ignoring the difference between the English and metric tons, a cost of 0.50 kilograms of dust. If 1010 kilogram must be delivered each 83 days, that's what they figured on, provided dust falls out at the same rate as soot, 5 times more than the 1987 total ton miles will be required. So they actually had figures in 87 as to what they were going to use on the public, but they started doing this about 94 instead up to 98. The question of whether dedicated aircraft could fly longer distances at the same effective rate should be investigated, so they decided to use the air forces for it. On page 459, the conflict of interest, so-called experts recommended going ahead with geoengineering as soon as possible. That was 92. And that the governments of the world can simply reduce as much CO2 as they care to pay for. So they're going to go ahead with this as soon as possible. And they said they could do it within 2 years. Cloud stimulation by provision of cloud condensation nuclei appears to be a feasible and low-cost option capable of being used to mitigate any quantity of CO2 equivalent per year. These possibilities appear feasible, economical, and capable of mitigating the effect of as much CO2 equivalent per year as we care to pay for. Lifting dust or soot to the tropopause or the low stratosphere with aircraft may be limited at low cost to the mitigation of 8 to 80 GT CO2 equivalent per year. Such systems could probably be put into full effect within a year or two of a decision to do so. And mitigation effects would begin immediately. Because the dust falls out naturally, if the delivery of dust were stopped, mitigation effects would cease within about 6 months for dust or soot delivered to the tropopause, and within a couple of years for dust delivered to the mid-stratosphere. The report by handheld hand-picked experts and highly respected influential players, ends up supporting this option as the most effective good news for GM. It's important to note this technology is just a slight upgrade to the old geoengineering technology we forgot about, or were not reminded about. The following two 1970s articles are from the New York Times archives, and I've got their links. I'll put them up on my site, cuttingthroughmatrix.com, at the end of the show. You can go and look them up yourself. But here's one from the New York Times, July 12, 73. Senate urges the U.S. to seek end to all environmental warfare. Rainfall patterns are altered, growing support noted. The Senate gave overwhelming approval today to a resolution calling on the U.S. to take a lead in seeking an international agreement to prohibit environmental warfare, such as past American rainmaking practices in Southeast Asia. They're using it in warfare over Vietnam and creating flood and mud areas all over so the enemy couldn't get through. Another article from the New York Times by Seymour Hersh, May 19, 1974. U.S. admits rainmaking from 67 to 72 in Indochina, a first in warfare. May 18th, the Defense Department has acknowledged to Congress that the Air Force and Navy participated in extensive rainmaking operations in Southeast Asia from 1967 to 1972 in an attempt to slow the movement of North Vietnamese troops and supplies through the Ho Chi Minh Trail network. There you have government admitting they can change the climate decades ago. That international treaty was written up and ratified from 1977. That's at the United Nations. It's titled Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Any Other Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques, and can be viewed on the Federation of American Scientists sites. And the link is here, by the way, and on the Carnegie Endowment site, and the link for that's here too. This technology is obsolete, yet remarkably most of us would think it's a technology yet to be developed. Amazing how much we are not reminded of or not told about. And I'm telling you folks, we live in a completely fake paradigm. That's what the media, the general media, is there for. What the media does is to show you the side effects of policy implementations. Oh, look at that. Oh, isn't it terrible what they've done here? Oh, the cost of this, blah, blah, blah. That's what they give us, the side effects, the fallout, not the causes. Every day we get from media that it's normal for horrible things to happen to countries predominantly made up of brown or black people, and we don't bat an eyelid even if the pain is inflicted from a Western nation. But the question is, does unaccountable national security branches of governance have the same mindset when it comes to us, the peak of democratic civilized society? The UK, USA, France, Canada, and so on. Fortunately, there's an answer to that question, as briefly mentioned by the third largest newspaper in the UK, The Guardian. This is from the 21st of April 2002. A government report just released provides for the first time a comprehensive official history of Britain's biological weapons trials between 1940 and 1979. It's still classified after 79, folks. So this is what they have declassified. Many of these tests involve releasing potentially dangerous chemicals and microorganisms, that's bacterium and viruses, over vast swaths of the population without the public being told. That was all over Britain. The tests carried out by government scientists at Porton Down, this is what it says. The report reveals that military personnel were briefed to tell any inquisitive inquirer that the trials were part of research projects into weather and air pollution. That was from 1940 to 1979. One chapter of the report, The Fluorescent Particle Trials, reveals how between 1955 and 1963, planes flew from northeast England to the tip of Cornwall along the south end and west coast, dropping huge amounts of zinc, cadmium, highly carcinogenic by the way, sulfide, on the population. The chemical drifted miles inland as fluorescence, allowing the spread to be monitored. Cadmium is recognized as a cause of lung cancer, and during the Second World War was considered by the Allies as a chemical weapon. In another, this is what they do. This is what your own, them, your own them, as opposed to others them. This is what your own them does to you. In another chapter, Large Area Coverage Trials, the Ministry of Defense describes how between 1961 and 68, more than 1 million people along the south coast of England from Torquay to the New Forest were exposed to a bacteria, including E. coli and Bacillus globigi, which mimics anthrax. These releases came from a military ship. And I've put that out before. They did the same off Norwich. And then they tested the whole population who hadn't a clue. And all the doctors were in it through the National Health Service, collecting the data for the government. Oh yeah, you're dying of cancer. We don't know how it happened. Oh, so are the young. Oh, it's a mystery. The report also reveals details of the DICE trials in South Dorset between 71 and 75. These included US and UK military scientists spraying into the air massive quantities of Serratia marcescens bacteria with an anthrax stimulant and phenol. Some families in areas which bore the brunt of the secret tests are convinced the experiments led to their children suffering from birth defects, multiple birth defects, physical handicaps and learning difficulties. The report also confirms use of anthrax and other deadly germs on tests aboard ships in the Caribbean and off the Scottish coast during the 1950s. The documents state, this is the official document, tacit approval for stimulant trials where the public might be exposed was strongly influenced by defence security considerations aimed obviously at restricting public knowledge. The public are never told what's been done to them. You have never been in any democracy, folks. You've been in a never land.